Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Executive Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And before we talk about what's going on in Washington, let's talk about something that happened this week in California. We saw Vice President Mike Pence head to the Golden States to promote the U.S Mexico-Canada Agreement, the update, the Trump administration's update to the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is following a pattern we saw Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue take similar action earlier in June, going out west to promote the agreement out there. We've seen the administration really kind of head across the country into some of these battleground congressional districts to really promote the agreement. And Phil, some of the language that he was using, we haven't seen the full administration and congressional kumbaya on this, but some of the language Vice President Pence is using might lead some people to believe they're not that far off.
Yeah, he was, after his visit, he was at a farm near Fresno yesterday where he talked about a number of issues, including and especially the USMCA. And then later he talked to reporters. In the course of those remarks, answering questions there, he said that he expressed some confidence that the agreement, the implementing legislation technically, would get passed by the end of the year. He said White House staff had been on the Hill this week conducting negotiations over the text of that implementing bill. And in his words, they were not that far apart from the Democrats.
And important to note also, some more administrative weight being pushed around on Capitol Hill in the form of U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer coming to Capitol Hill today, here recording on a Thursday afternoon, to meet with a group of House Democrats that's been charged by Democratic leadership to kind of negotiate some of the areas where they're a part on that. And really, obviously, USMCA and NAFTA, very important for the broad scheme of American agriculture, but some of the issues that are up in the air really not as agriculturally focused as things like labor, environment, pharmaceutical prices, all that fun stuff.
Right. There are issues that have to be resolved to the satisfaction of enough Democrats in the House, but they're not necessarily ag-specific issues. Those have pretty much been addressed. We saw this week the wheat growers and some senators from those northern plains states, spring wheat producing states, say they want to get some issues addressed just on the side, not in the text of the agreement, but with Canada. Long been concerns from wheat growers in Montana and in those spring wheat states that their wheat is not giving the proper value when it's sold up in Canada.
So a lot of things still up in the air on USMCA, and this week was actually the first week that the Trump administration, given the constraints of TPA, could have sent the implementing legislation to Capitol Hill. That obviously didn't happen, or we would be telling you about it right now. But so that's something that some folks are kind of wondering when that ball is officially going to drop, and there's been some reporting this week suggesting that might happen in early September. And some other things that are going to have to happen in early September, just given the lack of progress that we're seeing here as we ease into mid-July, is some kind of progress on a budget agreement and appropriations bills in order to avoid a government shutdown at the end of the fiscal year, which for the familiar will know that arrives at the end of September. And Phil, we didn't see a ton of progress, publicly at least, this week on negotiations between the administration and Capitol Hill on just how they're going to keep the government funded here in almost 2.5 months.
We have had some discussions, private discussions between Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and House Speaker Pelosi. That's sort of restarting things. There's two big issues here. You mentioned the debt ceiling. There is a report this week that the debt ceiling could be reached in September. So that's one deadline that Congress potentially faces. The other is really, well, there's actually two of them. There is the October 1st, which is the start of the new fiscal year. And then probably the biggest deadline is January, when the cuts required by the 2011 Budget Control Act kick in. That's the one that Congress really has to worry about. It's a good chance if they get some kind of deal here that you'll see another stopgap spending bill, a continuing resolution to keep the government operating on October 1st, possibly into December. We've seen this a lot in the last several years. If they need more time to get either the appropriations bills or passed or big omnibus bill like they've done in the past, where they just put them all together.
Mm-hmm. So the return from the August recess is certainly setting itself up to be a busy season
As
here in
usual.
Washington. Yeah. We typically don't take a lot of time off in September in this business. But before we let you go, I do want to just provide a bit of an update that we heard from the Department of Agriculture here this week on the market facilitation program, specifically the 2019 version of it. When USDA originally rolled out this latest trade assistance package in late May, they said they were hoping to issue MFP payments in July or August. And what we're hearing from the department this week by way of FSA Administrator Richard Fordyce was that they're waiting on having confirmation of planted acres from certifications that producers do with FSA field offices in a number of states, about a dozen of them. That deadline was pushed back a week. For all other states, it's arriving here next week. And so that's potentially either whether it's that July 15th or July 22nd deadline, that really is going to be pushing up if they're going to issue payments yet in July when the formula for those payments has not yet been announced, and a number of other things still up in the air. If they're going to issue payments in July, they're going to be working incredibly quickly to do so if they're not getting data until the 22nd.
Yeah, July 22nd, that's the deadline for farmers to file those reports, and suffice to say, these happen to be states with a lot of corn and a lot of soybeans, big agricultural states that were affected by the flooding this spring. So yeah, you're right, Spencer. It's you start to creep into August pretty quickly. It's
right. So we'll keep you up to date as we're learning more information about when those payments can be expected to be distributed. Phil, we were talking before we press record here that we're seeing new dairy assistance payments going out here this next week as well.
Well, they've actually started going out on Tuesday officially for those farmers who've actually signed up for the dairy margin coverage program already. We expect a lot of them to kind of wait until closer to the deadline in September to do so. But yeah, the payments started going out. And for farmers who signed up for that new 950 coverage level, we also know that they're going to get payments for all of the first 5 months of the year now. USDA just put out the May level, margin level. It's under the 950. So there'll be a payment for May as well as going back to January.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of USDA programs to keep track of right now in terms of when checks are hitting the mail and hitting your mailboxes across the country. And we'll be sure to keep you up to date on all the information that we're hearing on that subject at agripulse.com. But I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.